let's talk about one of the most incredible, almost unbelievable upsets of the entire Second World War. It happened way back in the early days in the deserts of North Africa. It was called Operation Compass, and honestly, it stands as one of the most lopsided victories you'll ever see.
Okay, just look at these numbers because they're kind of nuts. On one side, you have the Italian 10th Army. We're talking 150,000 men, 600 armored vehicles, and a whopping 1,600 artillery guns. And on the other side, the British Western Desert Force, just 36,000 men with way fewer tanks and a tiny fraction of the guns. I mean, this is the definition of a David versus Goliath fight, right in the middle of the desert.
So that brings us to the big question, right? How on earth does that happen? How does a tiny, outnumbered force not just beat, but completely wipe out an army more than 4 times its size in just a couple of months? Well, the answer is this amazing mix of clever strategy, a little bit of tech, and a whole lot of nerve. To really get how the Brits pulled this off, you first have to understand what the Italians were doing. So, it's late 1940, they've invaded Egypt, and then they just stopped. Their massive army dug in, waited for supplies, and probably felt like they were in a pretty rock-solid position. But here's the thing, and this is where you see the hidden weakness. Yeah, they built all these big, fortified camps, but they were miles apart from each other. And the real kicker? Most of the army was non-mechanized infantry. They had to walk everywhere. They were basically a giant sitting duck. Even their own commander, Marshal Graziani, apparently had some serious doubts they could handle a fast modern war with the British.
So looking at this huge Italian force, the British didn't plan some massive frontal assault. No way. They did something much, much smarter. Operation Compass actually started out as just a 5-day raid. The idea was to just punch them hard, cause some chaos, and then get out.
And this quote from the British commander, General Wavell, it just says it all. He wasn't betting the house on this thing. He's basically saying, look, I'm not expecting a miracle, but if we get a lucky break, we are going to be ready to run with it. And boy, did they ever get a lucky break. So the plan itself was just beautiful in its simplicity. First, forget a head-on attack. They found a huge undefended gap between the Italian camps and decided to just drive right through it. Second, they'd hit the camps from the rear, from the west, exactly where nobody would be expecting an attack. And third, they'd lead with their secret weapon, the Matilda II tank. This thing was a beast. Its armor was so thick that basically none of the Italian anti-tank guns could even scratch it. So on December 9th, 1940, the plan goes into motion. The British force, after moving totally undetected across the desert, just slams into the back of the Italian camps. And the result was, well, it was immediate, and it was a total disaster for the Italians. Just check out this timeline. The speed is absolutely breathtaking. The first camp, Nibawawa, was gone in about an hour. By the end of that first day, the Tumar camps were overrun too. Within 2 days, the main town of Sidi Barrani falls, and you have entire Italian divisions just giving up. And get this number, 38,000. In the first 3 days of what was supposed to be a little raid, the British took 38,000 prisoners. They had captured more enemy soldiers than they had in their entire army. The Italian front line didn't just bend, it shattered. And this, right here, is when Wavell's big opportunity became a reality. The raid was so ridiculously successful that it immediately turned into something else. It wasn't a raid anymore. It was an all-out chase across hundreds of miles of desert.
The Italian retreat just completely fell apart. One after another, their major strongholds started to fall. The British took back the border at Sollum, they pushed deep into Libya, they captured the key port of Bardia, and then they took the big prize, the fortress of Tobruk. And the number of prisoners just kept skyrocketing. Bardia added another 40,000, Tobruk another 25,000. At this point, it wasn't a battle anymore. It was the total disintegration of an army.
So by late January of 41, what was left of the Italian 10th Army was in a desperate, headlong retreat, trying to get back to Tripoli. And this is where the final and maybe the most daring part of the whole campaign happens. So you have to picture this. The main Italian force is just a massive traffic jam of men and machines, all fleeing west along the one and only coastal road. They probably thought the big empty desert to their south was their protection. They were very, very wrong.
This move is just brilliant. It's the masterstroke. While the main British army is chasing them down the road, a tiny, fast-moving column of light tanks and armored cars takes this incredible gamble. They turn south, straight into the uncharted desert. to try and cut across the coastline and block the Italians' escape.
And incredibly, they made it. At this little spot on the coast called Beda Fomm, this small British force slams on the brakes and sets up a roadblock, just hours before the front of that huge, retreating Italian army shows up. For 2 days, this tiny force held off wave after wave of desperate attacks until the trap was completely sealed. Another 25,000 prisoners were taken. The Italian 10th Army was officially destroyed. So after 2 months of non-stop fighting and advancing, what did the final score look like? Well, the results are, honestly, they're almost hard to process.
Just look at this table for a second. The Italians lost over 133,000 men as prisoners. They lost hundreds and hundreds of tanks and guns. And the British? In exchange for all that, they had fewer than 2,000 casualties, killed and wounded combined. It is, without a doubt, one of the most lopsided victories in modern history.
The final result was just as stunning. In just 60 days, a force of 36,000 men had pushed forward 500 miles and had completely erased an army of 150,000 from existence. It was a total, complete victory that should have changed the war in North Africa. But, and this is a huge but, this is where the whole story takes a crazy twist. Just when they were about to kick the Axis out of Africa for good, the British High Command stopped them. They got worried about a German invasion of Greece, so they ordered their best, most experienced desert troops to be pulled out and sent there instead. And at that exact moment, a new player shows up in Tripoli to help out the Italians. A small German expeditionary force led by a general nobody had really heard of yet, but who would soon become a legend, Erwin Rommel. The Afrika Korps was here, and the Desert War was about to start all over again. And that's what's so fascinating about Operation Compass, isn't it? Was it one of the most brilliant victories of the war? A masterclass in bold, fast-moving warfare? Absolutely. But it was a victory whose incredible gains were thrown away almost immediately, setting the stage for 2 more years of brutal fighting over the very same ground. A truly legendary victory, undone in the blink of an eye.